Episode 74 of Fish Unfiltered. Marlins are coming off salvaging the series against the San Diego Padres, defeating them by a final score of 10-8. That was a crazy game. We'll talk about some key pieces of that one. Isaac, how we doing? Big guest today. Excited to have him on. It's been a while. Last time we had him on was right after the 2024 trade deadline. A lot has happened since then for Craig, and we're excited to have you on, Craig. How we doing?
Of course. Great to see you guys. How's everything?
Not too
Pretty
bad.
good. I want to start with what's been going on with you, Craig. You made a big announcement that you were going to join FanDuel Sports Network to do the I believe, post-game show as well. How's that been for you? How's the transition been like?
Yeah, look, it's definitely been different, and it's exciting. It's a lot of fun to prepare in a different way for the games that I have in the past. Definitely has changed my view on a lot of things and sort of how I report. I think that's probably obvious to everybody too. But Kevin, after doing this as long as I've been doing it, it just kind of came to the point where I thought it was a natural transition to go on to the broadcast.
Mhm.
And in the off season, had some discussions about making myself available for that. And FanDuel, spoke to them about games and the amount of games and what I would be doing and sort of how it would work. And at least from the results I've seen thus far, everyone is really enjoying it. So I'm hopeful this is the beginning of something even more. I guess that sort of remains to be seen. But I've been also doing some commentary in the radio booth as well during some of the games also, and believe I'll still be continuing that and having a lot of fun doing it. and it's definitely different for me in the way of sort of doing things with the club or in concert with the club as opposed to doing things independently. But I definitely felt like it was time for me career-wise to make the step.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as a person that watches a lot of the broadcasts, you being on there at least gives us some reason to watch the Marlins live pregame show. As before, it didn't really draw much attention on my way anyway. But what I wanted to ask you was, given that you are sort of in concert with the team, I'm curious if that sort of limits you with some of your thoughts when you are tweeting or reporting on the Marlins. If there's some negative thoughts, if maybe you restrain yourself a little bit now that you are a little bit are working, I guess, with the team.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, of course. Yeah, no, like I mean, it definitely is the case. Yeah, I think that what's changed. I think the biggest change I think maybe from my reporting in the past is to now is the breaking news aspect of it, which is being part of the broadcast. We do get more access to things that are going on the club from people in different times. I just had to work a lot harder to get that independently as opposed to now. But I think with that, it also means that at least I feel personally, I'm a little bit more restricted into how the news is broken because I do have access to some of that. So
Mhm.
I think that I'll still be able to do what I've been doing in the past, but it's definitely coming in a different way. But the sacrifice for that is being able to be on the pregame show and doing it on TV. And I just kind of felt like, hey, look, from a family point of view, monetarily and career point of view, breaking news and doing all that stuff that I did, both locally and nationally, by the way. And I'm not really doing anything nationally right now just because I've chosen to go this path. You know, I guess at some point, guys, it can become lucrative, like some of the best newsbreakers that are out there for me. But for me personally, I just really wasn't seeing enough financial outcome to that. It was fantastic working for the Herald. There's no question that I had a lot of great memories doing articles there and producing articles, getting paid to do that. And the podcast, the Swings and Mishes podcast, also for a period of time was financially good for a while too. But this is something that I basically think that I can bring a lot to the table. It's something that the FanDuel Sports Network has never had before. And so
Mhm.
while I am breaking some news, some of it does, Isaac, yes, scaled back just a little bit. And for people like yourself and people who are also in the industry, you guys do have a much better opportunity to be ahead of me in some of this stuff. Now, it doesn't mean that I don't know what's going on, but I'm a little bit more careful as to how my news is disseminated. Yes, that is true.
I want to get into this season so far with you, Craig, because the Marlins currently find themselves 22-32. Just lost the series to the Padres, but really could have made the case that that series could have gone a lot differently, especially those first 2 games, Marlins got off to a 3-0 lead, blew that, 6-0 lead, blew that. Then losing 6-1, come back, win it 10-8. Overall, a lot of good, a lot of bad as well. How do you assess this team so far, and just Clayton McCullough through, as many games as he's been through right now?
Yeah, I mean, Kevin, I don't play that what if game because we could have done
Yeah.
that with the Angels. We could keep
Yeah, true.
back to all these series and say what
Mhm.
if, and they should have won. I'm gonna get some text tonight that says, "Oh, we should have won all three." Like I'm gonna be like, and you should have lost all three against the Angels.
Right.
Yeah, that's true.
I think baseball just evens itself out over the course of the season, and the thing that it has a little bit of 2023 in me this year, and I'll say this. The Marlins are, in all likelihood, not going to make the postseason, okay? But it does feel a little bit like the summer of 2023, where just when you felt the Marlins season was about to completely break, they would win a couple and get back in it. Like, it kind of feels the same way. Like, if they would have lost this one, they would have been 12 games under, on pace for over 100 losses. Now they win, they're only 10. And it feels like it's like, okay, this is a little bit better than maybe what you thought it would be. So that's kind of my theory on the season is it's a little bit better, I think, than I thought. A lot of it is, of course, because Agustin Ramirez, I think, has been a major factor on offense, and you're finally starting to see some offensive players come through the pipeline, even though he did come from the Yankees. You're starting to see some of that happen, and that, I think, is a cause for optimism for sure. So I'm not trying to be delusional in saying that the Marlins are going to win 85 or 90 games, but at the same time, this could have been a lot different. I don't think, guys, we would have expected them to look like the Rockies, but it wouldn't have shocked anybody to see them be 20 games under 500 at this point. So 10 is what it is.
Yeah. Want to talk about Yuri, who just completed another rehab assignment in AAA Jacksonville. Has a couple more after that. Greg, more or less, what are you hearing is a timeline for Yuri, and how do you think they'll handle him? We know how they did it last time, but this was a healthy Yuri Perez, and well, he's going to be healthy, but he's just coming off this injury, and really hasn't been let loose at the major league level ever yet. So, how do you think they'll go about handling someone like Yuri?
Yeah, they'll be careful again, I think. If I had to guess, I think at least one more start, maybe two. I think what I said on the network was that he would return for that homestand later in June,
Mhm.
where they'll play the Phillies and Braves. But that could change. They could get rid of one of those rehab starts. But I believe he's definitely making another one. They said that he wanted to have 5 innings. He got that, I believe it was yesterday or today, whenever that was. So yeah, I think he'll be back and he'll add to the rotation, which definitely needs some help because it's let's just be honest, the starting rotation's just been wildly inconsistent from start to start. You really don't know what you're going to get. I mean, Cabrera was fantastic his last start. Can this guy put together 2 back-to-back? I don't know. We've almost never seen it. Max
Right.
Meyer looked great for a period of time. He's taken a little bit of a step back, getting hit a little more. Sandy starts have been inconsistent. So I think that's the word, is they're looking for a little bit more consistency there, because there's only so many times you can go to the bullpen and ask for 3 or 4 innings, and they've pretty much had to do that almost every night.
All right. Well, actually, to go off point really quick, even when the starters are giving them 5 to 6 good innings where they could maybe give the bullpen a night off, they seem to be really strict in letting some of these guys face a lineup a third time through. It wasn't the case as much last year. Obviously, circumstances are different. How much of that is manager Clayton McCullough's call, or is that all coming from upstairs? A few instances, for example, Valente Belloso against the Dodgers, Cal Quantrill the other day, 46 pitches against the Angels, gets yanked. There seems to be a different philosophy in 2025.
Yep, no question. The organization believes that a relief pitcher that comes in fresh almost every time outside of an elite starter is going to be better against a lineup the third time through when a relief pitcher comes in. That's their belief. So that's why you're still seeing a lot of that. I think in my I can give you my opinion, because I do have a good opinion on this, and when it pertains to this, I think some of that is valid. If you have a Sandy Alcantara, or you have, and I know they've taken Weathers out, but if you have a Weathers that's going great, I think that you would keep those guys in. But where I sort of disagree a little bit with that concept is that the data is going to tell you what the Marlins are trying to do is valid, and the data will tell you that the third time through, starting pitchers generally are going to get hit more than relief pitchers. my opinion on this is, and this is no disrespect to any relief pitcher, if that is the case, then why are these relief pitchers not starting?
Right.
To me, the reason why they're not is because they can't, and they're not starters. They didn't grow up 16, 17 years old dreaming of coming in the seventh inning in a Major League Baseball game. They thought they were going to be starters. So to me, the talent is always going to be stronger from most of the starting pitchers. So even though the data is probably going to state that, I do take exception to that, especially when a starter is going good and he has the potential to be a top 3 starter on a Major League Baseball team. Almost all times, more often than not, those guys are better than the relief pitchers. So, like you guys, it is a little confusing to me, but I understand the strategy the Marlins are trying to employ because it works and the data says it does. But for me, I don't know. A starting pitcher to me is going to get paid 200 million and a relief pitcher is going to get paid what, 40, 50 at most. So what does that tell you? Who's the better player? It's the starter.
Yeah, I would agree. Just sort of eliminating the whole human element, for in that game with the Dodgers and Valencia, just dominating, and the game plan was working. And then as soon as you take out that starting pitcher, it all crumbled down quick. Another starting pitcher I'd like to ask you about, and I'm sure it's just as demoralizing for you to watch as it is for us. Just Sandy Alcantara unable to get anything going aside from his first 4 innings on opening day. He has been basically live batting practice for these opposing teams. He has not looked the same. If you had a guess as to what it is it just he went so long without pitching? Is it mental at this point? What do you think is going on with Miami's ace?
Yeah, I mean, I've kind of heard a lot of different stuff. So none of it seems to be valid at this point. There was a couple conversations I had that alluded to him, pitching the ball this season faster than he ever has when he catches the ball and delivers it to the plate, basically not taking his time and letting the clock go down and immediately throwing. That was something that I heard, kind of saw that through a little bit and saw that to be the case, but I don't know that had any effect. Other part of it is it just come down to that that Stallings was just a superior game caller to any of these other players, because Sandy generally is going to really work with the catcher very well. And was it just that magical season that Stallings and him were in concert every single start? Maybe that's it too. But like you guys, I'm sort of searching for it also, because there's really nothing that I could put my finger on that tells me, hey, this is the exact reason why. And honestly, it kind of dates back to when he pitched in 2023 too.
Yeah.
So I've been asked a lot about it. I still maintain he's going to figure it out, but it's kind of, at this point, it's kind of time for us to stop saying, "Oh, well, it was just 1 inning," or "Oh, there was just a lot of singles," or a lot of seeing eye hits here. Yeah. They've got to get together as a group. And by the way, Mel Stottlemyre, who you guys probably know, is one of my favorite guys. I mean, I personally don't think like that it's this big of an impact that could cause him to have an ERA over 8, which is I think the highest in the NL or close to it. So I really don't think that's it. Maybe Sandy would say differently privately. He hasn't told me that. So I'm going to just maintain that I think at some point he'll get it turned around. But we also have to acknowledge at this point, what does turning around look like? Is it 6 innings and 3 runs, and 5 innings and 3 runs, and 7 innings and 4 runs? That may be the case. And so the Marlins, to me, are basically have 1 month to decide, hey, look, are we like seriously going to entertain shopping this guy, or is it just best that we hang on and try to redo this again next year?
Yeah, I guess it just depends on how much they want to shed that remaining salary of his contract. I assume that plays a major role in.
I don't think so. I know what you're saying, Isaac, and yes, his salary plays a major role, but that salary has to be replaced. You know what I'm saying? Like, you can't. Their Marlins are not going to go into next year with a payroll of 40 million or something like that. So, let's not discount the fact that's. I mean, look, they could have a low payroll. I don't know that it'll matter one way or the other. I mean, Miami could be 5 games better next year, 10 games better, 5 games worse. It could be around the same thing, but I don't foresee them having a payroll of 40 million or something like that. I think they would have to go out and get some guys.
Yeah, that would be hard to defend. On the opposite end of the spectrum, positive note is Marlins top prospect Agustin Ramirez. I don't think anyone could have guessed that he would perform as well as he has That trade for Jazz Chisholm Jr. is looking really good right now for Miami. And I got to ask, obviously he's performed great. The Marlins have not extended a player in a very long time. Is this someone that they might consider doing that with?
I mean, we're way too early, I think, to make that call on him. So, yeah, I mean, is it possible? Sure, but I mean, we're 2 months into this, so it would, to me, it would have to be an off-season thing with him. I don't see that happening right now, but never say never. I think that they're open to extensions. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
Another thing I wanted to ask you about was Xavier Edwards, who is currently on the IL, set to come back probably on next the Rocky series. I would have to say. How would you assess how he's looked so far at shortstop? We know that their intention is to bring him back, play shortstop. Hasn't looked good. In fact, I think some of the numbers are even worse than last season, at least arm strength wise and other things. And then you're looking at someone like an Otto Lopez, who looks really good at shortstop, has a good arm. Like, it's been really good stuff from him in this sample size. And even then, when he's, you look at the leadoff spot, Jesus Sanchez has looked good. Augustin against left-handed pitching has been good. Where do you see Edwards? How much longer do you think they'll continue this shortstop experiment? Do you think he should still be leading off for the Marlins? Where do you stand with him right now? It's been a weird season for him.
It has. He's a really good player. I think he's one of those buy low guys for me. I think he's gonna be excellent in the second half. The thing that the Marlins kind of have to identify, and it's crazy to say, we may be right back down the road like we were with Luis Arias, where Edwards may be more valuable to another team than he is the Marlins. Like, it's crazy to say, but think about it. Like, I mean, Augustin Ramirez let off today. Like, do they really need a table setter on a team that's not going to make the postseason? Because this is basically what he does. Kevin, the other part of it too, is there is serious evaluation going on with him right now at shortstop. I'm not sure that he is shortstop for the remainder of the season with the Marlins. They feel like he could potentially be a Gold Glover at second. I think there's a chance that ends up happening. I don't know if it's now, in a month, 2 months, 3 months. So he's one of those players I think that certainly could remain with the team long term and at the end of the season, but also wouldn't surprise me for them to take a look and say, hey, look, we've identified it at this point. We believe. I'm not. Again, you're right, Kevin. I do think he'll get another chance to play shortstop. I just don't know if they view him as the long term. I think Otto Lopez may be able to play that position every day.
Fish on First has partnered with About the Fans to launch a merchandise collection. Rep the FOF logo in more Marlins-inspired apparel. Find it all at aboutthefans.com. Enter coupon code FOF10 at checkout to get 10% off your order. FOF10 for a 10% discount.
Wouldn't shock me if Edwards is one of those guys that turns it around for the next 2 months, and then some team comes calling, like teams have the last few years, and they say, you know what, let's see what we can do here in terms of trade. I hope not. I really like him, but I think anything is on the table in July.
Yeah, especially with how the hometown guy was here and looked really good in that 60-game stretch. But someone else I want to ask you about is Matt Mervis. I think you mentioned this, I think on the radio it was recently, that maybe Troy Johnson finally gets his opportunity after so long. And Mervis has really just struggled. I don't think he has driven in a run since April 23rd or something like that against the Reds. Where do the Marlins stand with him right now? He's really struggled. Thought maybe he had finally figured it out early on. And what's up with Troy? Because this is a guy who's not on the 40-man. And he's putting up some of the better numbers of his career at age 27, unfortunately for him. But yeah, what's going on with this whole situation, and how soon can we see someone like Troy actually debut for the Marlins?
Third straight year we've asked Craig Mish the exact question on this show. It's freaking awesome.
This is the closest I think that it'll be, and I do think, by the way, that had Mervis struggled right out of the gate or gotten hurt, or maybe Wagaman gotten hurt, I do think that they would have called him up. The issue that they had was with the middle infield, first with Lopez and then with X. So that's why Ronnie Simon is on the team. And that's really the only reason Ronnie Simon is on the team. So Troy potentially could have got his shot had something else happened. The other thing that is sort of working against him at this point is Wagaman is playing pretty good. So all of a sudden, maybe the Marlins are like, all right, you know what? Let's just play Wagaman at first base, and so be it. The Marlins are high on Wagaman. They feel like they may have found something here. They're not really positive what, but if you consider what they're paying him and sort of how they found him, they kind of feel like he's a find where he could be an everyday player in the big leagues. So they're pleasantly surprised with him. As far as Troy is concerned and Matt Mervis is concerned, I think Matt, for him, and talked to him in the clubhouse and stuff like that. I feel terrible for him. I really, really did think what I saw in April was the beginning of a breakout. It clearly is not the case. I think that he probably in his heart knows he's running out of time too. I said a couple of weeks, I think, on the broadcast, which was about a week ago. They got a homestand coming up here against the Giants, against the Rockies. I don't think much more than that. I think he's got to pick it up here in the next few days. And by the way, is it fair to him to just not play now and ask to pick it up? I don't think so. So it may just be better for him to get some minor league at bats at this point, because if he's only going to play once every 3 or 4 days, I don't see the point of having him in the big leagues.
So that's the other thing I wanted to ask you, because I know he has an option left. Would they just option him? Would the DFA him if that was the case? How would that work with?
I'm not positive about that, Kevin. So I don't, it'd be unfair for me to answer that. I don't know.
And I guess the other thing that came out today, either today or yesterday, was that they're going to be trying Liam Hicks out at first base as well. And that, I guess, leads into the next question, which would be on the catching situation. They're currently having 3 catchers on the roster with Joe Mack in AAA, and Joe Mack continues to just rake and look awesome. Where are things currently with that position? And credit to them, the position depth, at least at catcher, is probably the best it's been in a very long time.
Definitely.
And do you think they could trade someone like a Nick Fortes? I know we just saw Matt Tice get traded recently. You don't usually see catchers getting moved, but if they really like Liam Hicks, obviously Augustin's going to be here for the long run, and Joe Mack is on the cusp. It seems like Fortes is maybe the odd man out in this whole thing, and they could get some sort of value from him, just what he's done defensively.
Yeah, I'm not sure what a player like that would bring back in a trade, to be honest. I don't know. Maybe.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Look, catching around the league is so poor that, if we were to look at 15 teams and say, could Fortes be better than 15 other catchers in the big leagues right now? Maybe, I guess. But it's also very hard to trade for a catcher during the season that doesn't know the pitchers, which is why you almost never see it. But they do not want to send Hicks back. He's not going back. So Hicks, for the time being, my understanding is sort of they've told him, hey, look, when you play, you play. And when you don't, enjoy the food because you're in the big leagues. That's kind of the deal. Like, you're here. We're not going back. We really like what we've seen, and you just got to kind of bide your time. Do I think that Ramirez is the long-term answer at catcher? I'm not sure. But my sense is that you'll see more of him catching and more of Hicks catching in the second half of the season. Could Fortes be moved? Certainly. At this point, I don't think that there's going to be any serious offers or consideration for him. But I feel like those two, Ramirez and Hicks, may be August and September.
Yeah. You mentioned Joe Mack. Is he someone we could see up in the major leagues this year?
At the end, maybe in September.
Okay. All right. Well, that brings up any other, I guess, potential trade candidates. I assume it'll be the same as last year, where that trade deadline day in St. Pete was just crazy.
It was.
Yeah. Everyone in that bullpen, I assume, including, today he had a little bit of a rough outing, Ronnie Henriquez, who has been another tremendous find. I don't know about the Wagman find. I've been arguing for that one, but Ronnie Henriquez has been incredible for the Marlins this year. Are they listening on practically every single relief pitcher on this roster?
I would assume so. I think that if you said to me, like, to guarantee that there'd be players on the team that for sure in August and September would be there, I would say Yuri Perez, and I would say Augustin Ramirez. And then beyond that, like, I'm not saying Wagaman is not, couldn't get traded. I'm just saying, like, they value him. So it's not like you're going to give him away. They're not going to give Xavier Edwards away. They're not going to give Otto Lopez away or Ryan Weathers or Max Meyer or anyone else. But the two names that I gave you, I think they feel are the building blocks for the team. And then beyond that, I think they'll listen.
Norby too?
I think the view on Norby is he is an everyday player. I think that they like what he brings, and the same goes for Stowers. With Norby, I think the data shows he's been a little bit lucky. He's got to probably take more pitches, walk a little bit more. I think that that's what they'd like to see. And is he an everyday player in the big leagues? Absolutely. Can he be better? Can he be an all-star? Absolutely. But again, next year, what does next year look like? I'm not sure. Maybe it's a little bit better. And then all of a sudden you're starting to get into closer to arbitration years and everything else again with some of these players. So I'm not saying that they're like cleaning house like they did last year and you're going to see 17 guys traded. I don't think that's the case. But every team sort of has to identify what the building blocks are. And Yuri Perez is one, Ramirez is two. And I expect most of the players you see to still be on the team after the trade deadline, but don't be shocked if somebody's moved.
I'm glad that Isaac mentioned that Dane St. Pete because a lot of those trades seem to finally, be showing, like the success of those individuals at the big league level. How would you assess that trade deadline now, almost a year later? And I guess how would you assess how Peter Bendix has done now in the midst of this is year two?
It seems to me he's hitting better than 50%, which is really hard to do.
Yeah.
So we start there. I mean, generally speaking, that's been the case. So look, I mean, free agency, the only two moves that were 7-figure moves were Tim Anderson last year and Cal Quantrill this year. And so we know what Tim Anderson was, okay? But Cal Quantrill still remains to be seen. So I think the jury's still out. He's pitching much better. If they end up flipping him at the deadline for something and he pitches really good, that's going to be a win. So maybe it's a wash as far as free agency. But these little free agents that they picked up, like Otto Lopez, or I don't know how they got him, some sort of deal or
yeah, it was like a waiver claim.
Yeah, waiver claim. So that's been a good move. Wagaman, like I said, has been a good move. The Trevor Rogers trade to acquire the two players from Baltimore, obviously that was a good move. Augustin Ramirez looks like it was a great move. So all of those are on the good side. I'm not sure that they got anything for AJ Puck at this point because, De Los Santos did not look great in spring training and still has a lot of work to do at the minor league level. I think Troy's ahead of him as far as getting a call up. So that's on the other side of it. But, again, things can change quickly. And then you'd have to tell me what were the other, the De La Cruz trade was a nothing for either side. I don't think.
The Luzardo one, I think, is.
Oh, yeah. Well, that one obviously looks like it was pretty good for Philadelphia. Look, I don't know a ton about Starlin Caba. I just look at the stats at this point. What I'm going to say is that if Luzardo is healthy and Philadelphia makes that bet and wins that bet, that's a great bet that they end up winning and going to the postseason. I just don't think that there were a lot of teams that thought that Luzardo was healthy enough to make a trade for him.
Yeah, I agree. It was a risk, and Philadelphia they gambled
and
they
won. Shot.
Yeah. And if Miami had held on to him and he got hurt again, then you get even worse than Caba and Boyd. Yeah. So you can't blame Miami. One question I had for you, Craig. Last time we were at the ballpark together, we were discussing one of the articles in the Sun Sentinel by David Hyde, I believe it was, regarding the teams, not just the Marlins, just teams around the league, the reluctance to spend in free agency until there is some clarity regarding the collective bargaining agreement that is set to expire, I believe, in a couple of years. Mm-hmm. So is it fair to say that, not just the Marlins, but a few other low revenue teams are going to be very hesitant in spending much more? Miami has spent $8.5 million in the last two off seasons combined on free agents. Do you see that trend continuing, particularly with the Marlins, given that they're just going to wait to see if there's a cap, floor, or both?
Yeah, well, the first thing is that from I think, and I don't want to speak for the Marlins, but from the Marlins perspective, you could have gone. Look, I understand that fans want to see spending and they want to see new players and they want to see free agents. I personally don't think that another 10 million or 8 million or another Tim Anderson or something like that would have done anything to get Miami closer to Atlanta, Philadelphia, or New York. So this year in particular is what I'm speaking to. Mm-hmm. I personally do not care that they didn't do anything. To me, the Marlins were a team that if they beat, get under 100 losses, 90-something losses, and that would have been above the expectations where the season was. If they added a couple of players, people would have said, oh, wow, they're spending money. But what would it really have done? It would have made us happy for a few minutes, and then if the guy is not good, we would have ripped the move anyway. So for me, that's what this year was. I don't know what next year is going to look like, but I do think, Isaac, that there's just no competing with the high revenue teams at that level. To have a payroll of 100 million and then another team of 250 million is just not a sustainable product for Major League Baseball. I do think that the players are going to be adverse to it, but there needs to be a cap. I believe there needs to be a floor. And I do think that if that happens in 2 years, I think you're going to see the Marlins in this thing and fight hard. I do. I think at that point, they'll have gone through a little player development, understanding what their positives are, how they can get the edges in different levels of the minors and some of the development that they're doing throughout their system, AAA, AA, and so forth. And then, understanding that teams can only spend a certain amount, other players will be available to Miami that wouldn't have been before because other teams will be capped out and they're not able to spend. So to me, that's it. That is where we're going to really learn how the Marlins can compete at this level against some of those juggernauts, because I just don't think without that, guys, that they can. I just don't think that they can. Can they every once in a while, every 3 or 4 years, come up with a 90-win season? Yes, because it's baseball and teams do that. The Rangers did it. The Diamondbacks did it. Can the Marlins jump to a $90 million pick? Yes, they absolutely can. But sustainability over the long term, I don't think it's possible in this division to fight with the Mets, the Phillies, and the Braves with the current CBA. I think there needs to be a change.
Okay. Well, I guess that answers pretty much. No, just to play devil's advocate a little bit, obviously, I agree with you 100%. If they had added a few more of those fringe free agents this offseason, they're not winning many more games. However, on the off-field argument would be, fans deserve to have their major league team, sports team, at least involved in some sort of free agency talk, because every Marlins fan knows that there is zero connection with Marlins and any medium-sized free agency. So I feel like there is some obligation as an owner and someone that runs a team to at least give your fans hope that you might sign someone to an 8-figure deal or a 9-figure deal eventually. But I guess that's just,
I understand that, but the track record for free agents over the last several years has been extremely poor with signing players. And so I think it takes two in this case. Let the president, Peter Bendix, get his feet under him a little bit, understanding the kind of players that will work. And then let the people who are going to spend the money determine when that's going to happen, because there's a lot out there as far as what's not done, but and it has been a while since Avisail Garcia, and it has been a while since Jorge Soler. It feels and I understand as a fan, it feels really bleak that this past year no money was spent. But what I would say to the fans is that they did spend 3 years and 36 on Soler and 2 on Segura and Johnny Cueto for 10 and Avisail Garcia for 50 and Tim Anderson, and none of it worked. So it is hard to say, well, do it again. Just keep doing it. Just keep doing it until it works. I mean, and I guess that's what the Mets do,
right.
I guess that's what the Giants do. You just keep doing it over and over again. But it's just not, it just didn't work. So they went about it a different way. Will that be the way? I don't know. You guys don't know. We have no idea. But drafting, developing, international, making trades, supposedly being sharper than everybody else, that's got to be the way that they got to go about doing it.
Yeah, I agree. Just playing
the international side, it worked with VMJ came up, but it's another, it's good to see homegrown guys up there.
They had Juan Soto. They traded him for a franchise and got back Mackenzie Gore and James Wood, and who am I missing?
DJ Abrams, Robert Haskell.
Insane trade. Like if there was one player that Miami had like that they could move to and hit, by the way, on the trade, it's an altering deal. By the way, that's another great point you brought up, Kevin. Like, who's to say that the Nationals aren't the 2023 Marlins and sitting there 2 games under 500? I mean, that owner's desperate. Who knows? Maybe they go out and spend some money and fight. Do not count out the Nationals this season either. They're going to be right there, I think, throughout the year, and then they'll be back in it next year too, and they could spend $200 million, no problem. So it's a tough position to be in.
Yeah, there was an excellent article about that in the Athletic regarding the national situation. Just final one from us, Craig, and then we'll let you go have dinner on this Wednesday night. We're recording this on May 28th. Just your outlook for the 2026 Miami Marlins. The tone of voice, I don't think we're all super optimistic regarding a big jump in wins for next year. However, how do you see the Marlins tackling it? Do you think they're going to be a little bit aggressive for the major league roster in 2026, maybe at the 2026 deadline? What do you envision next season looking like?
I mean, I think you would have to think they'll be better, but I don't know what that will look like. I mean, how much better still will remain to be seen as far as the money is concerned and payroll. It's all going to be whether Sandy's a part of this or not. If he is not, then I think that you'll see them go out and sign free agents. I don't think they'll be multi-year deals, but certainly they'll have to go out and spend some money to fill roster spots. So with Yuri Perez there and Max Meyer and Weathers. And look, maybe this is it for Cabrera. Maybe finally we're seeing it. I mean, we've said it several times. Maybe this is it with Norby and Stowers and Otto Lopez and Ramirez and some others. Could you close your eyes and say, if the Marlins, let's say the Marlins overachieve a little bit this year and win 70. I think that that's possible at this point. That would make them 22 games under 500 and above every expectation. I think that probably they feel maybe they could even win more than that. But I'll say they win 70, 72 games, something like that. And then at that point, could you say, maybe they win 77 the following year, +5? Yeah. I mean, I could definitely envision that. But at the same time, I don't know what the roadmap is at the trade deadline this year, too. And if you told me all of a sudden they dug back deeper and got some great prospects for Stowers and X Edwards and Ryan Weathers, and they did deals like that, we would, take the timeline back a year again. So I don't know, but I could see a lot of the same players that they have now on the positive side back again, and with some development that you're seeing from Mac and Ramirez and some of the other players that they have in the minor league system, I could see them being better, but clearly no guarantees. It's sports.
Mm-hmm.
I'll throw one more out there because I know you mentioned Joe Mack and potentially when he could come up. There are a couple other top prospects that are really performing, like Snelling, maybe Mazer.
Mhm.
Just what are some timelines on maybe certain guys? Maybe you're hearing like some of those top prospects. I mean, Snelling just was Southern League Pitcher of the Week again for a second time this year. I want to say he's been really good. And then just like certain other guys that maybe you think are close. I know you mentioned to us, maybe it was in that last podcast with Griff, and he ended up debuting that year. He wasn't a top guy, but he was certainly a guy who.
Yeah, he's part of this too for next year, I think, as well. Yeah, so my understanding going back to spring training, and without like saying timelines, and I'm not saying somebody told me it was exactly this, 2 months really was the deal. We're coming to the end now. So I do feel like there's a chance in June that you could see some roster shakeup where, Yuri comes back, somebody goes down. We mentioned Troy Johnston. I do think you're going to see some different stuff in June than what we've seen in April and May. And by the way, that's the right decision to have, because if you're playing, 10 game under 500 baseball, you may as well develop and try and see some other players. So I think as opposed to years past, you may see some different players up sooner and give them a little bit more runway this year. But they had to give Matt Mervis and X and Norby and all of the players that they had to give, and Jesus Sanchez, an ample amount of time before evaluating and making those decisions. And I don't think, by the way, guys, this is any coincidence, because a lot of major league teams look at Memorial Day and say, okay, where are we at? What do we like? What do we don't like? I feel like they've showed a lot of patience thus far. But next week after, you see Mesa come up. I'm telling you, I do think you're going to start to see some shake up a little bit. And that's not shake up to say, hey, look, we got to win right now. Let's call up guys to win. It's just let's start taking a look at some of the other players we have. The season, before we know it's going to be over in September, you can't call somebody up in late August that you want to see for the future and expect to have any expectation based on September numbers, because that would be foolish.
All righty. We'll wrap it up here then on that high note. Craig, we really appreciate you for taking the time. And from Craig, Isaac, and myself, we'll see you guys all in 2 weeks. Peace out and go Fish.